Hello and welcome to another Enough Already podcast. My name is Fingers Malloy. Tracy L. Connors is my lovely co-host. Hello, Tracy.
Hello, Fingers.
Well, we have a lot to talk about this week. Bill Maher was breaking hearts on his show. Bernie Sanders said some interesting things about terrorists. Potentially being able to get their right to vote back. But I think we need to begin with the big story of the week, Tracy. And that's Joe Biden.
Yes.
Creepy Uncle Joe announced, finally, that he's running for president. And did you notice something, Tracy, about this election cycle? It seems like some candidates who have decided that they're going to run for president on the Democratic side of the ticket have decided to make multiple announcements.
Yes.
There have been a few that have, it seems like they've had at three different times announced that they were running for president of the United States.
Well, they get I'm launching an exploratory committee announcement, and then the announcement that they're going to announce, and then the announcement.
Right. And so, the first, Uncle Joe was going to announce earlier in the week, and then that was delayed. And I'm wondering if that was, on purpose, not so much that they weren't ready to make the announcement, but it would just be more speculation when he's going to announce, so to keep his name in the news.
Well, remember, too, the story we're going to discuss about Bernie, that happened Monday night. So that was still in the news cycle come Tuesday and Wednesday. So don't step on that when things are looking bad for the guy that's right behind you in the polls.
Oh, that's true. And maybe that was the reasoning. But, I mean, because it's got to be hard to try to generate buzz for an 87-year-old candidate for president of the United States. How old is Uncle Joe?
76.
Oh, young 76.
Yes, very spry.
Unless you talk to President Trump.
Yeah.
Who made some comments about how Joe's been looking lately, but we could talk about that later. So Joe announces that he's running for president, and he brings up the tired old narrative regarding Charlottesville. And you have the story there, Tracy.
No, I don't.
Oh, you don't have it?
No, I don't. What I have is a video that somebody made plugging in the correct information when it comes to Charlottesville.
Okay. All right. My bad. Just woke up. So there were some very good people in Charlottesville. That's the narrative.
Very fine people. It's very fine people.
Fine people. And so that means that President Trump, of course, was giving. Am I butchering the whole thing?
Yes. If anybody doesn't know about it, they have no idea what you're talking about.
How am I butchering it?
Because you have to do the setup. So he said there's a statue fight going on at the same time, right? This is what's going on while the neo-Nazis and Antifa are there. There's a group of people that want the Statue of Robert E. Lee to be taken down and a group of people that want to keep the statue up. So when talking about the incident after the fact, and this happens 3 days later, so he's already made a couple statements. This happens at a press conference in the lobby of the Trump Hotel in New York, and the press is peppering him yet again because they don't think he's denounced neo-Nazis enough. So then he starts talking about who else was there, and he said there were fine people on both sides.
Well, that's what I was going with. But the left is making out as he was saying that there were Nazis in the crowd that were some very fine people.
Correct.
And that once again just proves that Donald Trump likes to play to the Nazi base of his party.
Of course, not even dog whistling, just blatantly, "I love you guys."
Right.
Great.
Exactly.
Folks.
So you have a video correcting the narrative.
Yes. So Biden put out this 3.5-minute video where he's being all sincere and telling you that he's here to save us. He's going to put America back on the correct moral path now. But Joe Biden, of all people, is the conscience of the nation. And he goes right into the Charlottesville hoax. And originally he was going to make this announcement in Charlottesville. And
what?
He was set to announce in the city of Charlottesville, and then they said, no, thank you. Please don't do that.
Wow. No, I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's how much he's pinning his win on this hoax. it's just so funny. It's a week after the Mueller hoax dies, the Russia collusion hoax. Now we've got to go back to this one. So there's the king of all memes on Twitter is a gentleman who uses the moniker Carpe Duncum. So he took Joe Biden's announcement video and recut it with the correct information for everyone. So here we go.
Charlottesville is also home to a defining moment for this nation in the last few years. That's when we heard the words of the President of the United States that stunned the world and shocked the conscience of this nation.
And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
He said there were, quote, some very fine people on both sides. Very fine people on both sides?
And I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally.
We've heard it so often, it's almost a cliche, but it's who we are. That's what we believe. Crazed faces, veins bulging, spreading in, bearing the fangs of racism. I believe history will look back on 4 years of this president and all the embraces and the great moment in time. If we give Donald Trump 8 years in the White House, he will forever and fundamentally made America great, and I cannot stand by and watch that happen. I'm announcing my candidacy for President of the United States.
Liar.
Yeah. Pretty much.
And you'll have the willing accomplices in the mainstream media who will not ask questions, not try to correct the record, because they've been a large part of pushing this false narrative.
Well, a lot of them still think it's true, even though the clip that he used of Trump saying, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, comes immediately after he said there were fine people on both sides. Somebody from the press interrupts him, and then he continues, and that's what he leads with in the second part. So that's the whole context. They always leave that part out because it completely clarifies who he was talking about.
Selective editing. And it's funny, that's been the constant complaint from the left and the mainstream media about James O'Keefe's work over at Project Veritas is, there's selective editing, or going back to Andrew Breitbart. When he was alive, the video is selectively edited, and that's basically what they've been doing ever since the president announced that he was running for president. Is there's been selective editing of comments that he has made,
right, or putting it in a different context. So like the most famous ones that I can think of are him. He called all Mexicans rapists and murderers. No, he didn't. He clearly said there's some fine people in that group. It's the fine people thing that keeps getting him in trouble. But as other people pointed out, do you really think that President Trump thinks that these migrants that are coming up across the Mexican border, that the women and the children in that group are racists and rapists and murderers? Probably not.
But apparently he does to these people. But the thing is, when it comes to the fine people on both sides comment, you're going to have many in the mainstream media and in the left who don't think that there are any people on one side that are considered fine people because they were protesting the removal of Confederate statues.
Right. But that's way different than white supremacists and Nazis. I get it that with them, they put them all in the same category.
That's right. I mean, you have the NRA convention is happening in Indianapolis this weekend, and you had a city official from Indianapolis condemn a local deli here, Shapiro's Deli in Indianapolis, for feeding Nazis.
Oh?
Yeah, the NRA... People who are attending the NRA convention are considered Nazis to this guy. So they're gonna do their best to lump all these people together, and there is just a certain segment of our population on the left who it seems like anyone to the right of Bernie Sanders they consider neo-Nazis. It's insane.
Well, neo-Nazis, really, the new deplorable.
Right. And it's going to be interesting as Joe Biden moves forward with his campaign. How is he going to be able to sound sane when he's surrounded by insanity?
Well, you don't think he's capable of sounding sane in that insanity?
I think the temptation is going to be to move further and further to the left, which is fine. That's what candidates do when you're running for the Democratic nomination. You're dealing with primary voters who tend to be much more left, obviously, than general election voters. But we're seeing some crazy ass shit being proposed by Democratic candidates. And the one that you have up that we could talk about now is Bernie Sanders. Now we're having a national debate over whether domestic terrorists who are in jail right now serving a life sentence or basically a death sentence in the case of the Boston bomber should be allowed to vote.
But you really think, not to leave Biden for a second, hang on.
Okay.
You really think Biden's going to go that far left?
No, but he has to appeal to lunatics who believe that the Boston bomber should have a right to vote.
I think that's three people. I honestly think that this is politically ridiculous to take that position.
The type of people who think that, though, that may even be a bridge too far for some on the left, and I would hope that it is. But people who come up, candidates who, this is an example of a candidate who thinks that they have to move further and further to the left to kind of come out in the crowd, and when you're competing with 26 people who are running for president of the United States, you need to figure out a way to stand out. Well, these loony ideas are being thrown out there, and then you have other people on the left who are running for president who have to comment on it.
Right, but I think Biden is a special case. He doesn't need to do that stuff to get attention. He has a universal name recognition at this point. So I think what he's going to do is just try to say, and he kind of said this in his opening little video thing, he wants to take us back. And it's not racist or awful when he says it, because he doesn't mean he wants me in the kitchen barefoot and pregnant in the 50s. What he means is he wants to take us back to the Obama years. So he's going to talk about probably fixing Obamacare and stuff like that and fulfilling the promises of the Obama administration, that kind of thing. Back to when everybody was getting along in his mind.
His greatest hope, I think, as a candidate is to be the adult in the room and look presidential.
Right.
You could picture Joe Biden being president of the United States, and he's the grown-up in the room. I think that's the way he's going to have to portray himself, and he's going to have to stay away from lunacy that we're seeing from some of these candidates.
Well, I think he's okay with that. Like, he'll be able to pull that off, because I don't think he is as radically left as these guys are. And he's always wanted to be president. This is the third time he's running. So he knows if he just behaves himself well enough, he'll get the nomination. At this point, looking at the field right now. So I think he's going to come out hard at Bernie Sanders.
I think you're right that he's going to get the nomination only because there are just too many people in the race. I mean, you have a large segment of the base of the Democratic Party that they simply do not want a white man at the top of the ticket. Mm-hmm. But when you've got 19 people splitting the vote.
Right.
And you're the former vice president of the United States. And until the grabby sniffing of the hair controversy reared its ugly head a couple of weeks ago, it seemed like he was the darling to many on the left. And now he's weathered that storm, apparently, by just going out and making a couple of faux apologies. I think that he's the guy to beat. I don't see how, unless some people drop out of the race in a hurry.
Yeah, I don't think nobody's dropping out until after at least the first debate. There's no reason to.
And what's that debate going to look like?
Oh, it's going to be ridiculous.
Because I mean, here we are. It seems to me that the debate in this country, if you're on the stage, it's going on the Democratic side. It's going to be okay. All of us agree that Trump is a racist. Mm-hmm. And then it's going to be answering ridiculous questions like the one that was posed to Bernie Sanders. We are really spoiled in this country if a potential voter is asking about convicted felons in prison as to whether they should have the right to vote or not. Is that really a pressing issue? Is that something that the folks in Ohio and Pennsylvania and Michigan and Wisconsin give two shits about?
It is. I think this is part of CNN's ongoing effort to destroy Bernie Sanders. You think I'm kidding?
Why does he keep going back?
Because he's an idiot. Or maybe
no
he just doesn't want to win. We could be right on our scam pack track with him. This is all just to grow his bank account.
Well, that's what was said about Donald Trump was when he announced that he was running for president. It was just a publicity stunt.
Right. As if he needed more publicity.
Right. Maybe you're right. Maybe this is a play. Bernie Sanders doesn't really want to be president of the United States. He wants another beach house. And he wants to sell more books.
He wants a beach town at this point. He's like, hey, Jane, what do you think is the craziest shit I could say without losing any of my support? It's like Trump in the street, saying I could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue and I wouldn't lose any support. Bernie's got that kind of support.
Is that what's going on here?
We could be. I can't wait until the debate because you're right. Like we would never have thought that. Excuse me, should we allow convicted felons who are sitting in prison serving their sentences, including murderers, rapists, and terrorists, to have the right to vote? Where's the lobbying group for this? Whose issue is this? I'm a single issue voter, and if those damn terrorists don't get the right to vote, I'm not voting for you.
Right, and I don't mean to belittle the transgender community, but I mean, how many questions during these debates are we going to have regarding transgenders in bathrooms?
Oh, they're still asking about that?
Oh, I'm sure that it will have to come up.
No, I think the new thing is the military service.
Okay.
Because about 6 people want that.
Well, I'm telling you, it's a constant topic of conversation, at the water coolers around Columbus, Ohio.
Well, the bigger issue now, the 2 trans issues will be serving in the military and this trans male to female, because I don't know what to call it otherwise. So a man changing into a woman playing in women's sports, especially at the high school and junior high level. That's a big issue. And I don't know how you win people saying, yes, I'm in favor of that.
I would share with you a little story. The school district I live in, I have 2 kids. An elementary school is a teacher there got a government grant to teach first graders about transgenders.
The government is the federal government or the state?
I haven't dug far enough in to find out if it was a federal or state grant. I could just tell you that this was on a neighborhood Facebook page where a concerned parent said, hey, the elementary school, by the way, is teaching first graders about transgender issues. And the reaction to me was, it was stunning to me how many people were celebrating this on this Facebook page. Because
really?
This is first grade. I'm like,
these are 6-year-olds. Yeah.
Yes. What, can't we let children be children? Do we have to start with this already? Part of me wanted to troll the room and say, well, geez, I think this is too late. We really need to be piping this information into the womb. We need to hit these kids early with this stuff. You're way too old at 6.
Yes. You've already formed all your prejudices by 6. There's a study that Harvard put out. So you should get a grant to make an audio tape that can be played to in vitro babies so they get this message before they're ever born.
Right. So watching this go down, and these people are all neighbors. So they are, the tolerance train is running this person over for questioning. Right. this grant and this policy at this elementary school, but they're not going full out calling him a bigot because he's a neighbor. But I'm looking at this thinking, okay, and one person did say on the thread that, wow, I'm getting tons of DMs from parents who are outraged but don't want to talk about this in the Facebook page because they don't want to argue about it.
Right.
So is this what's going to happen when you have Democrats coming out and throwing out stances on issues like this, where you have a vocal minority on the left who will attack anyone publicly for pushing back against it, but privately a vast majority of people are going, God, these people are all batshit crazy. I'm voting for Trump.
Yes. I think that's exactly what's going to happen, and they've laid this trap for themselves. So I encourage it. I want to hear one of them say, I'm going to direct my Department of Education secretary to make it so that any public school that does not allow boys who believe they're girls to play on girls' sports teams be cut off from federal funding.
Oh, Jesus. Can you imagine?
Yeah, I can imagine. That's easy to imagine. Who are you kidding? You know they want that. But I would imagine it's got to be 80 to 90% of the population thinks that that's just a ridiculous idea and patently unfair. And there's no enforcement to say whether or not you're legitimately transgender or you're just doing it because you could get a college scholarship now. Or you can rack up a whole bunch of medals. You could hold all kinds of state records. I mean, honestly, there doesn't seem to be any rule about that. From all the stories I've read, what was the most recent one was 2 boys won some girls' track meet.
Right.
And they're transgender, and you see them, and they have long hair, but then they're all jacked up. Just like, I don't think that they're on estrogen. I don't think they're taking hormones. I think this is a ploy because they want to win.
Right. Now, we're talking high school sports.
Yes.
How's the Olympics going to handle this?
I don't know. They've always had hormone testing, haven't they, to make sure people aren't doping?
Yes.
So, I don't know.
Doesn't seem fair, Tracy.
No. But you have to remember that the Olympics may be progressive, but I can imagine some of the Middle Eastern countries aren't going to be competing if that's the rule. I would imagine that China and Russia would also be like, yeah, no, we're not cool with this. A lot of the African countries potentially would say no. So I don't think this will be an Olympic issue for quite some time.
Well, going back to the lunacy coming from the far left, we had a national debate this week over the Boston bombers' right to vote. And I'm looking forward to these crazy national debates, because this actually turned into a little bit of a national debate. Because usually when we talk about we need to have a national conversation, usually a national conversation is a monologue, right? They don't want to actually have a conversation. They just want to get on the soapbox and tell you how you should think, and you should not resist. But so the Republican National Committee released an ad regarding this Boston bombers' right to vote, and Democrats who commented on it.
I've almost got it ready for you, Fingers.
Okay. That's okay.
I was still thinking you were going to have me play the Bernie clip first.
Oh, well, do you want to play the Bernie clip first, then we'll head over to the ad?
That's fine. Do that.
If you've got the Bernie clip queued up, then play the Bernie clip. Now, in the Bernie clip, are you including the whole question?
Yes.
Okay.
So this is from a CNN town hall. I guess Monday they did a marathon of town halls for all the Democrats because we can't get enough of them. They all have such interesting and different things to say.
Well, I think we need to form our opinion on a Democratic candidate running for president in 2020 in April of 2019.
Oh, without a doubt.
This is useful.
Yes. Well, and they also don't have Russia collusion to carry their primetime lineup anymore.
Right.
So.
Right.
All right. So here we go. Here's Bernie Sanders being asked, what should be a slam dunk?
Junior at Harvard, studying mathematics from Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And
Senator Sanders, you have said that you believe that people with felony records should be allowed to vote while in prison. Does this mean that you would support enfranchising people like the Boston Marathon bomber, a convicted terrorist and murderer? Do you think that those convicted of sexual assault should have the opportunity to vote for politicians who could have a direct impact on women's rights?
Okay, thank you for the question, Ann. And let me just say this. What our campaign is about, and what I believe, is creating a vibrant democracy. Today, as you may know, we have one of the lowest voter turnouts of any major country on earth. I want to see us have one of the highest voter turnouts. And by the way, what we're seeing is more young people getting involved in the political process, but not enough. And in my view, if young people voted at the same percentage that older people voted in this country, we would transform this nation. But to get to your point, we live in a moment where cowardly Republican governors are trying to suppress the vote. And in fact, right here, as you may know, in New Hampshire, the legislature and the governor are working hard to make it more difficult for young people to vote. And to me, that is an incredibly undemocratic, un-American process. And I say to those people, by the way, if you don't have the guts to participate in free and fair elections, you should get another job and get out of politics. All right? So we got to...
Stop it, Tate.
So,
can you stop that?
Oh, shoot.
How
all the way back to the beginning. Go ahead.
Oh, I apologize. You know, he makes this claim, and of course it's red tofu to the crowd. But how are they making it harder for young people to vote?
I would imagine it's something to do with having an ID, perhaps. I mean,
Okay.
otherwise I can't even begin to think about what the heck he means by that. It's just everybody knows it. Republican governors are trying to make it harder for everybody to vote.
And
only
everyone
poor
claps.
people and young people and people of color.
And everyone claps like it's everybody knows that.
Yeah.
How are they making it more difficult to vote? What are they doing? Are they putting armed guards at the polling places and asking, how old are you? Oh, you're under 30? Get the hell out of here. I'm going to shoot you. What are they doing?
Maybe they won't consider a bill to lower the voting age to 16.
Oh, good Lord.
I don't know. But I like to notice how CNN has the chyron, what it says up there. Do you support restoring voting rights for convicted terrorists and sex offenders? That's a little sugarcoating the question, isn't it? It was, do you support their right to vote from prison?
Right.
Not restoring. That connotates to me after they've served their time, which I don't have a problem with. But while they're behind bars, okay. All right, let's see where we are in this mess.
Undemocratic, un-American process. And I say to those people, by the way, if you don't have the guts to participate in free and fair elections, you should get another job and get out of politics. All right? So we got to... So here is, and to answer your question, as it happens in my own state of Vermont, from the very first days of our state's history, what our Constitution says is that everybody can vote. That is true. So people in jail can vote. Now, here is my view. If somebody commits a serious crime, sexual assault, murder, they're going to be punished. They may be in jail for 10 years, 20 years, 50 years, their whole lives. That's what happens when you commit a serious crime. But I think the right to vote is inherent to our democracy. Yes, even for terrible people. Because once you start chipping away and you say, well, that guy committed a terrible crime, not going to let him vote. Or that person did that, not going to let that person vote. You're running down a slippery slope. So I believe that people who commit crimes, they pay the price. When they get out of jail, I believe they certainly should have the right to vote. But I do believe that even if they are in jail, they're paying their price to society. But that should not take away their inherent American right to participate in our democracy.
And listen to the applause.
Yep.
Okay, and you're telling me that that message won't appeal to people, but listen to all the people clapping. Do you think that they even... A part of it is, do you think they even listen to the answer?
Well, no, not necessarily. I think you've got probably aside from that chick who asked that question, thinking it was a setup, because she doesn't look too pleased at the end of that. Like, huh? Really? You want the Boston bomber voting? Okay, because democracy? That's not a good answer, dude. But I think that most of them are probably Bernie supporters, and they'll clap at anything that he says. But I want the follow-up question, which didn't come, which is, okay, Senator Sanders, you're saying because this is an inalienable right that we all have now and as Americans to vote, does that also mean that you would like us to allow felons who are serving their time to have guns in their cells with them? Well, remember, he's been really pretty good on the Second Amendment.
Yeah. Which
is shocking. But by his same logic, then there's no reason that, what's his name? Zarnev, the Boston bomber.
Right. Was he the of the two? Was he the Rolling Stones cover boy?
Yes. Yeah. So he should be allowed to. I mean, maybe Bernie Sanders wouldn't let him have an assault rifle, but he might allow him to have a handgun.
Well, Tracy, democracy dies in prison. I don't know.
And so does Zarnev.
Yeah. Well, and that leads to another Bernie story. And talking about the grift.
Yeah.
Tracy, did you dig this? What made you decide to dig up this information?
I saw it on Twitter. Somebody tweeted this out. So let me pull up the tweet right here. Some chick who goes by the name of That Girl from Ohio tweeted out, of course. Here we go. Bernie Sanders spent $444,000 campaign dollars on his own book in 2015. And then she had a link over to the FEC site where it shows you all of this stuff. So you can see these are what the campaign filed with the FEC as far as their expenditures. And sure enough, he spent $444,000 on his own book. And so I started thinking about that. And I'm like, okay, well, he's, if you could be a millionaire too, if you just have a best-selling book, that's all it takes, really, as if that's something that's so easy. But so I just Googled, right? How many books do you think it takes to put you on the bestseller list?
I'll tell you what. If it were a New York Times bestseller list, and I already know the answer because you did the research, before I looked at what you dug up, I would have thought, 30,000, 40,000 books to get on the New York Times bestseller list?
Yeah, you'd think so. But no, you'd be wrong. It takes about 3,000 books to ensure a spot on the Wall Street Journal's bestseller list. And then if you want to hit the New York Times, you've got to sell 9,000 copies. So then we can do some more math here, fingers, and say he spent $444,000 on his own book. Mm-hmm. He's not paying cover price, right? When you're buying that many and you're the author. So let's say he paid just $15 to be kind. So that's 29,600 copies of his book. That's how you get a bestseller.
Wow.
This happens all the time, though, with these guys. I mean, the current mayor of Baltimore is on the lam right now because she had a couple nonprofits buy a ton of her books.
Has she fled the city. Mm-hmm. Have any CVS pharmacies burned down as a result of the scandal? Do we know?
No.
Are we on CVS watch?
Not yet. But I was thinking about that when Joe Biden said he was going to take us back to the wonderful Obama years. The first image that comes into my head is that CVS just being eluded for, 2 straight hours. They just had that camera locked off and people running in and out of it while Baltimore burns in the background. That's what we're going back to. Remember the good old days?
Scandal-free days, Tracy.
Yes. He repeated that on The View, by the way, and the audience applauded. Scandal-free Obama administration.
What was the only scandal was him wearing a tan suit? Is that their favorite line?
I believe so.
Well. Well, so I was shocked because, 9,000 books, that's selling 180 books in every state.
Yeah.
I thought it would be so much more than that. And I wonder, because publishing seems to be dead. Mm-hmm. A lot of people are self-publishing. A lot of people are going through Amazon, and people aren't buying books like they used to. I wonder if those numbers are a lot lower. They have to be a lot lower now than they were, say, 20 years ago. Maybe it did take 30, 40,000 books to be on the New York Times bestseller list, say, in 2000. And now, my God, just 9,000 books?
Yeah. How pathetic is that? Like you said, 180 in every state. Yeah,
don't get me wrong. It's quite an accomplishment to write something and have 9,000 people say, "Oh yeah, I'll buy that." But to think that that's all it takes to get on the New York Times bestseller list,
imagine if you had a television program that got 9,000 viewers. How fast would that be canceled?
Right.
And I get it. A book is a little bit more of an investment because you actually have to physically engage with it, whereas television you can just flip on and sit back. But still, it's a little bit absurd, and that's what made me think to go look at it. Because I've heard people talk about it before. Like, you don't really need to sell that much to be considered a bestseller. And I thought, well, it's got to be at least, 5-digit number. Nope.
Right.
Nope. So now we know how to do it. Fingers, we're going to... Scam Pack is now raising money so that Fingers and I can write a book about nothing. We can write a book like Michael Knowles' book. What was it? The Great Ideas by Democrats, and you open it up and it's just blank pages. He actually hit the bestseller list with that. He did. It was a great gag, but why not just do the follow-up to it to totally rip him off, and Scam Pack will buy 9,000 copies and hello New York Times bestseller list for us.
Well, and they have weird rules, too, for the New York Times bestseller list. Didn't Jordan Peterson's book not make the New York Times bestseller list for some reason? It was a Canadian book, or... They've got, weird rules for the New York Times bestseller list, so maybe our book wouldn't qualify.
Well, probably not.
They would bend over backwards to make sure our Scam Pack book couldn't make the New York Times bestseller list. This is an outrage. I'm pissed off we haven't even written the book yet.
Oh, huh. Yeah, you're right. They didn't put it on there.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah, they had some, like I said, they've got some weird rules regarding the New York Times bestseller list, and I guarantee you that Jordan Peterson sold a lot more than 9,000 copies of his book.
Oh, certainly. No, here, somebody answered it on Quora. They just said, brace yourself for some weird bullshit. In response to why didn't he make it, they say their logic is that the imprint is Canadian and therefore he's not eligible.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's a Canadian publishing house.
Wow.
Yeah, we don't care that this should be just strictly based on numbers, sales.
Right.
That's the only thing that should matter. If Americans are buying it, whatever. We're never going to understand the illogic of the left, I don't think.
Well, Trudeau wrote a book, and it was published
right.
by a Canadian publisher. Do you think that somehow would disqualify it from being on the New York Times bestseller list?
No. I think they'll come up with any reason possible to keep people they think are right-wing off of the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
And they definitely don't review their books. That's the other game they play. Because I think most, Coulter's books make it all the time, and Levin's books make it. And I don't know that they've ever reviewed one of Levin's books. I'm not sure about Coulter, but I know Levin used to complain about that all the time.
Well, all it would have been is a rebuttal anyway.
Well, yes. A pathetic one, I'm sure, but it would have been, this is terrible, don't read it.
Right.
And they would have not read any of it.
There's nothing worse than writing a book review. Have you ever had to write a book review before?
No. I don't think. I mean, I had to do book reports in school.
Yeah. I wrote one for the Washington Times.
Uh-huh.
It was for John Cleese's book.
I remember this.
When you're doing something like that, kind of nice because at least it's not a political book, But boy, oh boy, if I didn't get much flack for it because I wrote a glowing review. I thought it was a good book. But when you have a comedic icon like that, and if you were to criticize it at all, holy shit, the blowback you would get on social media. You don't want to open your Twitter or Facebook for weeks after that. But
no.
But when you're writing a book review for the Levin book in the New York Times, it's almost like Mark Levin has to know that the book review was written before the book was even released at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So that's red meat for the crowd, unless somehow you got a positive review in the New York Times.
Yeah, they do have a couple people that pretend to be conservatives over there. Maybe they would have them write it.
Maybe. Well, let's move on to Bill Maher.
Okay.
Now, you have a clip, and I don't know if you have it close to being queued up, but Bill Maher had Adam Schiff on. And this you could actually, there's an old scene from The Simpsons. I don't know if you were a Simpsons fan, where Lisa breaks Ralph's heart, and you could, and Bart replays it. It was on television on the Krusty the Clown show, and he paused it because you could actually see where, at the exact moment where Ralph's heart breaks. And this is what happened on the Bill Maher show, Real Time. Do you watch? Are you a frequent viewer of Real Time?
No, not at all. But I saw this clip making the round, so I grabbed it.
Yeah, play it.
Okay, if it will cooperate.
Blame Twitter.
I do. They've reworked Twitter yet again. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Something I did notice this week on Facebook.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know if this is a thing, and it has been a thing for a while, and I'm just noticing it, but they're starting to put the little information tab on Facebook.
Everybody rolled out new stuff this week. YouTube looks different. Twitter looks different. And I guess I saw somebody bitching on Twitter about Facebook doing what you're saying. But it looks like
it gives you little information on the site that the person provided a link to, saying, okay, this is a right-wing site, or this is a left-wing site, or I haven't actually seen left-wing yet. I've been looking around for, unfortunately, none of my friends are sharing Vox stories, so I don't know if they're putting, this is a left-wing site, but I have noticed, people were putting in links to the Blaze, and I'd click on that, and it would say, conservative site founded by Glenn Beck, yada, yada, yada. So it's pretty annoying. But apparently Twitter has rolled out something new on Twitter. I haven't noticed anything on Twitter new.
If you're only looking at it on your phone, you won't see any difference, but web Twitter looks totally different.
Okay.
So anyway, I think I can get this to work now. So Adam Schiff on with Bill Maher.
But this was our big gun. Now it just looks like you're stalking him. I think in the eyes of the people who don't follow it that closely, which is most of the country, here's the thing about Bob Mueller. He's like the last person, maybe the last thing in America that left and right agreed on. Left and right basically agreed. This is a guy of honor. This is an honest guy. This is an honest broker. Whatever he says goes. Americans are not into details. Don't read it to me, Bob. Just give me a thumbs up, a thumbs down. The fact that he was like, I don't. If you couldn't impeach before, how are you going to impeach after? Or should you? Well, were you on that?
Yeah.
I think you should have left the applause in right there.
Well, no, it restarted again. That's why we got the applause. But no, I get it.
Yeah.
Where are you now?
Well, I reject the premise of the question, first of all, because, the Mueller investigation didn't go, when it came to collusion. And
right.
I thought that's what we were all worried about, Tracy.
No, where have you been? It's all about obstruction.
Oh, I know now. Now it's all about obstruction. They moved the goalposts. But for 2 years, I heard it was collusion. And Mueller wasn't about collusion. It was about obstruction, which is now the new thing, which is why, that's why Democrats believe the president should be impeached because of obstruction. Well, what about the collusion? There was no about collusion.
Well, it depends on which Democrat you're talking about, because Eric Swalwell is still out there saying the collusion thing is real. This many contacts with Russian people. And it's like, if we focused on any single nationality and hyper-focused on it, I guarantee you they would have talked to people from other countries as much as they talk to Russians, if not more.
Yeah.
But
Swalwell is the rep from California who wants to buy back your guns, even though the government never owned your gun to begin with, but they're going to buy them back.
Yes. And if you don't participate in the buyback, then they'll just come take them.
I'm telling you, it went from nobody wants to take your guns to this cat running around saying, well, we'll buy them back. Didn't own them, but we'll buy them back. And if you don't sell them to us, we're going to come take them. And now you're going to have, if this guy pulls anywhere near the threshold to where he has to be on the main stage at a debate, he's going to make that statement, and then other candidates are going to have to go on record, whether they agree with him or not. And in front of a crowd that will mostly agree with him, you're going to have a lot of courage to go against that. So these guys and gals are going to be dragged further and further to the left, and it's going to be so fun to watch. I hope that they have all 27 of them on stage at the same time. It's going to be great. Make it a 4-hour extravaganza. I'll watch.
Well, to your point, Kamala Harris was, I guess, the next town haller up on Monday night. So she was asked about the felons voting and, while they're in prison. And she said, yeah, that's cool. And then the next day she was like, oh, no. We can have a discussion about that. But that's what's going on. It's like, wait, what did Bernie say? Okay, yep, I agree with that.
I actually appreciate her take on it. Only because I'm so, and this is really, in my mind, one of the reasons why President Trump got elected. It didn't feel like there were a lot of focus groups and handlers, crafting his message. It was just him talking what he was feeling at the time, and that's how I feel about it. Look, I think that position is crazy. But I find it refreshing that she at least we know what her real opinion is, because she said it when she was asked.
But is it her real opinion? You think her real opinion is that people should be voting from prison cells?
Yes, I do believe that. Okay. Because that's how she answered the question. And then once she got backstage after everything was over, the shit hit the fan with her staffers. And then they had to, we're damage control. We have to release a statement. You didn't really mean that. And then they backtracked the next day.
I totally disagree.
Really?
Yeah. I don't think she wants that at all. You got to remember her background. She was a pretty tough prosecutor, going after petty crimes and stuff like that. And remember the whole, we're going to lock up the parents of truant children. I think she's way more law and order than she wants to let on right now. So she's trying to distance herself from that. Here's Bernie took this position that makes it safe, so why not?
Well,
and
maybe
then
her
the
position
staff freaked the hell out and was like, you can't go there.
But maybe her position on law and order has evolved, Tracy.
Oh, sure.
Since her time at the DA's office, I don't know. I just feel as though when a politician is asked a question that he or she wasn't prepped for, you get an honest opinion. I mean, who thinks that they're going to be asked a question like that on stage? This is a pressing issue for people in this country.
Yes.
Really?
Mm-hmm.
Times are really good in 2019. If people are really worried about shit like this.
Well, that's the big problem for the Democrats, is despite everybody's warning, the first quarter is going to be terrible. 2% GDP growth, if we're lucky. And then the numbers come out, 3.2%. And remember what happened in January of this year. The government was shut down. That was going to destroy the economy.
That's right. And it was going to affect the numbers. And what's funny is I think that, and I when you said that, I was like, oh shit, that's right.
Yeah. People have totally forgotten about it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Nope. The whole thing closed down.
And
that's what No, didn't it end up being in the 20s, 25 days or something? Yeah.
Yes. It was the
longest shutdown in history, yes.
Right, but nobody cares.
And it didn't affect the economy. Imagine that.
And it won't affect the Republican Party come election time.
No. I think they should shut it down again. Let's shut it down for the month of May. Look, it had no impact. Actually, we grew more than everybody thought we would.
Amazing.
I know. It's stunning. I think it's time for more tax cuts and a government shutdown.
Right?
Yes.
Okay. So you brought up a topic that I think is very interesting.
Oh.
You know, we've been talking about Russian collusion. And now there's more and more evidence that there was Ukrainian interference in our election. And this isn't being talked about all that much because it doesn't fit the narrative.
No,
this is actually...
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
I was going to say, in certain quarters, this has been talked about for years now because this was pretty well documented. But
obviously, it doesn't get it didn't get the traction that the Russian collusion story got because it doesn't fit the narrative, which is anything a narrative built that will destroy President Trump. This has to do with Hillary Clinton and her campaign
and the DNC. Yeah,
and the DNC.
DNC at large. So this was a Fox News headline. And I guess Trump was on Hannity for basically the entire show the other night.
Uh-huh.
It was like a 44-minute interview that I've heard snippets of. So that's Trump's talking about this stuff now openly, this Ukrainian angle on everything. So
right.
This is a Fox News headline. Clinton-Ukraine collusion allegations, quote, big and incredible and will be reviewed, Trump says. So the article says President Trump told Fox News' Hannity in a wide-ranging interview Thursday night that Attorney General Bill Barr is handling the, quote, credible and, quote, big new revelations that Ukrainian actors apparently leaked damaging information about then campaign chairman Paul Manafort to help Hillary Clinton's campaign. So this is where it gets interesting because I had seen these stories, the next piece here, come up maybe a month or two ago, and I think by John Solomon in The Hill, who's been following this pretty closely. So the article continues. Last month, Ukraine Prosecutor General Yuri Lutsenko opened a probe into the so-called Black Ledger files that led to Manafort's abrupt departure from the Trump campaign. The investigation commenced after an unearthed audio recording showed that a senior Ukrainian anti-corruption official, don't you love that? Anti-corruption official apparently admitted to leaking Manafort's financial information, that's what the Black Ledger is, in 2016, including his ties to pro-Russian actors in Ukraine. And this leak was done to benefit Clinton. So Ukrainian law enforcement officials said earlier this month they have a slew of evidence of collusion and wrongdoing by Democrats, and that they have been trying to share this information with U.S. officials in the Justice Department. A Ukrainian court recently ruled that the Manafort leak amounted to an illegal interference in the U.S. election.
And?
I think
that's going to happen.
No, over there they're getting in trouble.
Sure. But, I mean, as far as... And look, it needs to be investigated, obviously, by the Justice Department, but I don't think anything will come of this in the United States. Do you?
I don't know. I keep holding out hope that one of these days these guys are going to get their comeuppance, because this is just ridiculous. I mean,
it is ridiculous.
And there's a lot more to this story. So if anybody's interested, go do a Google search for Andrea Chalupa, like the stuff they have at Taco Bell. That's her last name. It's true. Well, it's funny because, reading through this article, it's got a bunch of links. So I went back through some of the other stories, and they bury her name in all these stories. But she'd worked for the DNC. She's Ukrainian born, been with the DNC at least since 2004, I believe, contract work. But she had worked in the Clinton White House. And she's the one that started being like, oh, we can get dirt on Manafort and take him out. Back in I think it was in 2015, she started working with the Ukrainians.
I think the American people, if we did a full investigation on foreign influence in U.S. elections, the American people would be stunned as to the amount of tinkering and meddling going on. I mean, I keep going back to 96 and Clinton getting illegal cash funneled into his campaign by the Chinese government. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is standard operating procedure, and Americans shouldn't be shocked because the American government meddles in foreign elections all the time.
Right. And I was thinking, too, that the Trump Tower meeting that they always freak out about, right? They were going to bring him dirt on Hillary Clinton and all this stuff. They could just as easily have published it in a Russian newspaper. And then are you going to tell me that it's out of bounds for an American campaign to pull a news story from a foreign source and use that? Honestly, I just don't understand. You're not going to be able to stop foreign influence.
Of course not.
We can either quit freaking out about it and just accept the reality of it and try to put out good information, which seems beyond our press, or we can just run around screaming about it like we have been for the last 3 years.
Once again, I go back to the premise that I was throwing out there from the very beginning of all this. If Hillary Clinton hadn't have been such a shitty candidate, the Obama administration didn't dig into any of this because they felt, well, it's a slam dunk. Hillary's going to win. Well, Hillary was a shitty candidate and she lost.
Yeah.
If she would have been better, she would have won. Mm-hmm. And we're acting as though, what was the final tally? What did they say? Russia spent something in the neighborhood of $140,000?
Something like that. I want to say 160, and that's just because of the interview that Jared Kushner gave, and it wasn't really an interview. He was at the Time 100 party or whatever the hell it is this week, and they asked him about the Russia collusion stuff and the Russian interference, and he said they spent $160,000 on Facebook ads. During the height of the campaign, I was spending $160,000 on campaign ads every 3 hours. The fact that everybody's panicked about this is a little bit overblown and ridiculous.
If you can't overcome $160,000 in Facebook ads,
right,
you don't deserve to be president of the United States.
No, and she had $2 billion.
A lot of times Americans always want to know, how is our representatives in your...
Oh, you got to love websites that just have autoplay videos.
Right.
It's so rude.
I missed your last comment.
Oh, I was trying to remember how much Hillary's campaign had, cash-wise. I thought they were around $2 billion.
Yeah, $140,000, Tracy.
Sunk that ship.
I mean, how much did Bernie Sanders' campaigns spend on buying his book?
$444,000.
Wow. And think how much that helped his campaign.
Oh, immensely. No, I wonder what they even did with all those books. Do you think they sent them out to people as thank yous for your donation? Or?
I'm sure that's exactly what they did.
I would hope so.
They send the emails out, donate $10 and get a copy of Bernie's latest book.
Yeah.
And it gets you on the New York Times bestseller list, so you could say you're a New York Times bestselling author and maybe sell more books because you're a New York Times bestselling author.
And I'm a reader of New York Times bestselling books.
So there you go. Well, Tracy, we're an hour in. Anything else you want to talk about?
I think we've exhausted everything that we had planned on.
Remember, you can find the Enough Already podcast on iTunes, SoundCloud, Google Play. where all fine podcasts are sold. Please leave a 5-star review over on iTunes. It would mean a lot to us, and it helps spread the word of Enough Already. And, of course, you can watch the Enough Already podcast on BitChute and YouTube. Final thoughts, Tracy?
I'm excited to see Joe Biden barnstorm my great state of Pennsylvania. He's not going to Scranton, his hometown, to start with, mind you. He's going to Allegheny County in Pittsburgh, where the money is.
Are you capable of barnstorming anything in your late 70s?
I don't know. It's a good question. We could ask Bernie Sanders. Maybe he'll write a book about that.
Nap storming.
Barnstorm Bernie.
Remember, all things Enough Already can be found on our Facebook page, facebook.com. Facebook.com/Enough Already podcast. And all things Enough Already can be found at our website, enoughalready.us. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Fingers Malloy. She's Tracy L. Connors. We will be back next week with an all-new Enough Already.